My name is Olivia, and this is going to be the current trends case brief on the criminal case R v. Morrison 2019. Mr. Morrison was arrested on May 23, 2013, and charged with child luring under Section 172.1 of the Criminal Code. The accused, Mr. Morrison, was charged with child luring after he communicated online with a police officer who was disguised as a 14-year-old girl named Mia. Mr. Morrison posted an online advertisement on Craigslist in the casual encounter section, titled "Daddy Looking for His Little Girl." The police officer, posed as a 14-year-old girl, responded to the ad. In about 2 months, Mr. Morrison invited the 14-year-old girl to meet and engage in sexual activity. These communications led to Mr. Morrison being charged with child luring under the Criminal Code Section 172.1b. He was sentenced to 14 years in prison, which violated the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Shortly after, he filed an appeal to argue the conviction of his initial court case. Mr. Morrison argued that the mandatory minimum sentence violated the charter, and the court appeal agreed to the shorter sentence. He went to the Alberta Court of Appeal, then to the Supreme Court to take on his appeal. During the trial, Mr. Morrison argued that he believed that he was role-playing and was talking to a woman who was presenting to be a 14-year-old girl. He also argued 3 subsections of the Criminal Code, which violated his rights. First, he argued that Section 172.13, stating that the person who is accused of communicating with someone underage violated his rights, as he has the right to be presumed innocent under Section 11 of the Charter. The presumption of innocence violates the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, as they could be guilty even though there is reasonable doubt. Secondly, he argued that Section 172.14 violated the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, as he believed that the person was to be of legal age. Thirdly, he argued that Section 172.12 violated his rights to be subjected to cruel and unusual punishment under Section 12 of the Charter, as the mandatory minimum sentence of 1 year was not considered under these circumstances. Decision. The case was acquitted because of the many violations of his rights according to the Charter. 2 issues were brought up during the hearing, where Mr. Morrison took reasonable doubt to ascertain Mia's age and if Mr. Morrison's rights were violated by the Criminal Code. Since the mandatory minimum sentence under Section 172.1 did not apply to Mr. Morrison, it violated Section 12 of the Charter. Mr. Morrison was sentenced to 4 months in prison and 1 year of probation. The majority of the judges agreed that the reasonable steps did violate the Charter, as he was proven guilty before he was given a chance. The Court of Appeal agreed with the approach that Mr. Morrison could be found guilty on the basis that he had failed to take reasonable steps to find Mia's age. The Crown proved that Mr. Morrison did not take reasonable steps to find out Mia was of legal age, and this is not enough for conviction. Section 172.14 violates Section 7 of the Charter, which protects him of his legal rights by allowing for conviction. But the judges agreed that there should be a new trial because of the judge's mistakes, as the court reviewed that it violated the Charter. The appeal question was if Mr. Morrison believed that Mia was underage. The court observed that Mr. Morrison could not have found that Mia was underage unless he had took reasonable steps to ascertain the age of the person. To convict Mr. Morrison, the Crown had to prove that Mr. Morrison believed the other person was underage or failed to take reasonable steps. The communications between Mia and the accused occurred for about 2 months. Yet, there was never any face-to-face encounters and no evidence proving that Mr. Morrison was intending to have a relationship with a minor. Mr. Morrison believed he was participating in role play with Mia and lied about his age, while assuming Mia was lying about hers too. Mr. Morrison has had no criminal record, and as a man in his late 60s who has been involved in the community, there is no reason that he should be convicted for a crime that is not proven to be true. According to Section 12 of the Charter, Mr. Morrison was subjected to 14 years in prison, violating his rights according to the Charter, which states that everyone has the right not to be subjected to any cruel and unusual treatment or punishment. Because of the many violations of his rights according to the Charter, the case was acquitted. My survey question for you guys is stating that 2 previous Supreme Court cases dealt with child luring section of the Criminal Code, but this was the first time that the court had looked at whether it violated the Charter. How do you think this affected the court's decision to acquit the case? Thank you.